so much for taking time out of your schedule to join with us today.
It's an honor to be here, Tyler. Thank you.
Yes. And you know, Miss Bain is special for many reasons. Former director of bands at Pizitz Middle School in Birmingham, Alabama. Performed at Midwest Clinic in 2015, multiple times at the Alabama Music Educators Convention. Tons of accolades. And in addition to that, Miss Bain is, of course, throughout the Southeast and around the country as a clinician. That's all fantastic. And so many of you recognize that. But also, I'm very partial to Miss Bain because I also student taught with her and have known her for a very long time. And so I was especially excited when she agreed to do our video for saxophone. So thank you so much, Miss Bain, for being with us once again. So we're here obviously talking about tone. Now, Miss, of course, from being your intern, I know that you think that tone is the most important thing. Could you just talk a little bit about why you think tone is important?
Well, we try to do things with a lot of humor, or we did before we retired in the Pizitz band room. I'm sure it's still this way. And we would always say, as if from the tablets that you receive on the mount, that in the beginning there was tone. So it needs to be awesome.
Yeah.
You know, we put a lot of emphasis on games like the Golden Stan Award, the Tone of the Day Club, things like that, just to get students motivated to kind of improve their critical listening so that they're listening and modeling what they hear as a good sound, because you've alerted them to what's a good sound. You have to educate the kids as to what a good tone on their instrument is, a characteristic sound. So that's our job. And it may not be our principal instrument, but that's why we go to sources like this, so that we can try to learn a little bit more and help the kids. It's all about helping the kids.
So Ms. Bain, could you just talk about what you might describe as a characteristic or even an uncharacteristic sound that you might hear on a saxophone?
Well, when I think of teaching middle schoolers how to play saxophone, of course, I'm thinking of a classical sound. And the first thing that, this is not important that you tell the students about this, I don't think, but it's important for the teacher to know that I believe there are two completely different genre of well, you could call them two schools of saxophone sounds. And one would be the classical sound, which is what I think we need to go for initially with the student. And then there's a jazz sound that comes, I think, a little bit later with the aid of equipment, different mouthpieces and things like that. So we're starting out with our beginning student, trying to give them all the information that they need to produce a dark, glorious saxophone sound. So I always encourage interns that's not their principal instrument to get some of those sounds in their head. Listen to the current superstars, the Tim McAllisters, from University of Michigan, Otis Murphy from Indiana. Listen, we have so many resources now. Go to YouTube, do a little bit of listening, have those sounds playing as your students are coming in the room. Do all those things to set them up for success. But you can't teach a characteristic sound, and a kid cannot perform a characteristic sound if you don't know what it is. You got to know what that sound is initially. A lot of it comes from equipment, but more of it, as Donald Cinta used to say, is in between your ears. It's hearing it before you produce it, that audiation of a good sound. So you don't have to have a Selmer saxophone that's $80 million. But it really does help if you have a good student instrument and a proper mouthpiece. There's some wiggle room on the mouthpiece department, but I have some biases about that. And we always try to we were very fortunate in our area that the parents were willing to pretty much agree to purchase the student equipment that we felt that they needed. We called it a recommended list. You can't make anybody do anything, of course, but we always strongly recommended that if you can't get this Yamaha student saxophone, we'd really like your student to have, at least make an effort to get this model mouthpiece. And that changed many times for me over the years, but when I was wrapping up my 34 years of teaching beginning band, I had the students on a Vandoren Optimum AL3 mouthpiece for alto, TL3 for tenor. And we would start on a 2.5 Vandoren reed.
You know, our students now have this equipment. Can we also now talk about some of the initial things that you're setting your saxophonists up with once they got the right equipment?
Sure. Like what you do that first week, those first few lessons and things like that. Yeah. You want to set them up for success again. And to me, that comes, unlike a flute or a trumpet, for a younger student, a saxophone's a little awkward. It's a little heavy. It's a little weird getting it out of the case. So you have to model all those things for the student. So I think before we talk about embouchure, there's some things about assembly, I think, that helps you get to embouchure. So we would always have the kids open the case, of course, look for the name brand on top, but neck strap goes on first. And then we would do quite a bit of work initially with the mouthpiece on the neck. And that's so much less for the student to have to mess with, manipulate. You know, they're holding just onto the neck, maybe both hands on the neck. And we could talk about embouchure and producing sound on just that part of the instrument. We talked about, you know, the cushion of the lower lip. I have found that when I tell students, roll your lower lip over your lower teeth, well, usually they overdo it. So I would say, pretend like you're putting on your chapstick. It's wintertime, it's cold, you're putting on a little chapstick. Now roll just a little bit of that over your lower teeth. Mm-hmm. And then I think what's probably more important on saxophone than even clarinet is now feel the weight of your head on top of the mouthpiece patch. I have a bias that I think mouthpiece patches are really important. You want the student to kind of anchor, feel the weight of that head on top of the mouthpiece, and it's easier for them to do that if there's a patch there. Mm-hmm. That mouthpiece patch is a nice cushion resting spot for those upper teeth. And then we would talk about just closing in as like a drawstring on a bag of some kind. Just close in these muscles around the mouthpiece. And more than talking about it a lot, we just play for them what we wanted them to hear. I think it's important that you model for the student. As you get farther down the road, you'll find those students who are excelling quickly, and you can use them as models. But initially, they need to hear you do it. They need to hear you produce a characteristic sound on the mouthpiece and neck combination. And you can usually start to hear pitch tendencies even on just that part of the instrument. If somebody's got that flabbiness going on and things aren't quite where it needs to be, you're going to hear that flatness. And of course, the opposite of that is if you hear somebody with a really thin sound, they're probably biting on the reed a little too much. And you can check for that. You want to help them with the mouthpiece placement. That's really important. If you just ask them to assemble their mouthpiece and you show them how to put it onto the neck, always cork grease, of course, and then you show them how to get the reed on there and things like that, you're going to have to show them exactly where they need to place that neck on the mouthpiece. And usually it's a lot farther down than you think it should be. Otherwise, they're going to be playing seriously flat. And you don't need that to start out with. The ear can't tolerate flatness. We can tolerate sharpness, of course, a lot more. But I would recommend just monitoring a whole lot of walking through rows, seeing, show me how you got your mouthpiece on there. Okay. And then just going through the steps of how to produce the sound. We talk a lot about, probably the first 2 weeks of beginning band was no instrument. You know, we're doing things like breathing exercises, reading, letter names, staff, all the fundamentals of reading. And then when we do get the instruments rolling, usually after Labor Day, it was a process, just a step-by-step process. Okay, when you take this, and they don't take the instruments home the first few days, which is really difficult. There for a while, we made every effort to have our dealer deliver the instruments to the school. Because they need that help. You got to show them how to assemble. So, but we would talk about producing those first sounds and giving them a model and going through the process of setting up the embouchure and pulling the corners away, taking in the air, and then not really worrying about tonguing on the first day. But I sometimes just depended on the group and how we were doing with the general sound on the neck and the mouthpiece combination. I might even get to tonguing on the first day. And it's all by demonstrating. I usually would do a crazy thing. Well, I would play just a bunch of crazy rhythms, just tonguing on the neck and the mouthpiece, get them, just really jamming, get them hearing it and grooving with it. And then how am I doing that? Ask, Socratic method. How do you think I'm doing that? I'm doing that. Of course you got one or two. They're going to say, oh, your air, you're stopping and starting your, no, my air's constant. My air is not stopping. Who knows? And then of course somebody's going to get it. but you don't want to delay bringing in articulation too long, because I found that they just won't do it. If, it needs to be almost simultaneous with the first day of how to produce the sound and things like that. So we would start class for probably 2 weeks on just the neck, mouthpiece and reed, get everybody sounding as good as possible, playing a drone. I'm embarrassed to tell you, I've forgotten the pitch that you need to shoot for with your, and it's different for different brands of instruments. Around an F sharp, I want to say, F sharp concert, but we try to get everybody within, a manageable pitch center there on neck and mouthpiece, and then gradually bring in, we would do different things with sustaining the sound. And initially, I would not worry about holding the note very, very long. It's all about the taking the breath, getting the reed vibrating with correct setup with the embouchure. Then you add the articulation, and then you add the length. So the first day that we're introducing articulation, it just might be staccato quarter notes, just to get the feel of the response, tip of the tongue to the tip of the reed. I'm blabbing a lot. I'm sorry.
No, this is all fantastic. And as a matter of fact, what's great is those of us who've also listened to our video with Wendy Higdon talk about clarinet. There's a lot of things that are very similar. And one thing I don't think we may have covered in that video, but maybe we haven't. But anybody who might even only be listening to the saxophone video, could you talk a little bit more about articulation? Maybe go a little bit in depth there about what exactly is, and I'll, of course, I'm sure you're going to talk with us about some very common performance errors or things that you see that young saxophonists may not do. But could you also talk a little bit about like what might be a characteristic articulation, what might be a bad habit? Exactly.
Yeah, well, for saxophone players, just to get started, I'm very focused on keeping the throat relaxed. You don't want tension. It reminds me a lot of a brass player. You hear brass players talking all the time about keeping it all relaxed. And I think the same is true for saxophone. When the throat starts to get really tense, that's when you get a bright, edgy sound that I really can't stand. So I would really, initially, I avoid the syllable T. I had tons of success with T-E-E for my clarinets. Clarinets need that. They need that tongue position super high. Saxophone players, we'll get to this error in a minute, saxophone players often need T. But I think to get started initially, I just like the idea of ta, the feeling of that relaxation. And then I would talk an awful lot about tip of the tongue to the tip of the reed. When you hear that tubby, kind of dead saxophone sound that a lot, sometimes you'll hear students play with, a lot of times it's just there's too much flesh of the tongue striking the reed. And you're not getting the reed to vibrate because they're keeping it there pretty much. And it's just too much. It's way in, back from the tip of the tongue. Whereas if you can, think ta, some of the students may need T initially. And I would try to individualize this occasionally. Some of them did need the T syllable to get the back of the tongue up a little bit so you get the angle that you need. But I would even go so far sometimes, I would not ask them to do this, of course, for obvious reasons, but I would take a colored pencil and color the tip of my tongue and then articulate the reed, tip of my tongue to the tip of the reed, and then show them where the color showed up on the reed. And that was just like, light bulbs coming up occasionally. Because, you tell children something and you think they understand it. But then they do it and they're like tonguing way down the reed. So, but we tried to get, I guess you could call it a Suzuki approach, going where, even on just the mouthpiece and neck combination, I play a pattern with articulation, they echo back. We go down the row one at a time. You can do some evaluation that way. Then we do group. And then very soon, they play a rhythm with the met and we all echo them and they're creating a rhythm. So you have so many opportunities to evaluate many things. You can look at embouchure while that's going on. You can see how they're doing with their breathing. Listen to articulation, and then gradually you carry all that over to the entire saxophone.
Absolutely. I remember doing the I play, you play, even in the second semester with those beginners. And
Oh yeah.
And you're right. That's ironically one of the last questions on my list here is, things that you can do to reinforce that. But I just remember how many different things you can reinforce with just some basic I play, you play just at the very, very start.
Yes.
And that's everything from articulation to different shapes of notes and characteristic tone and everything, just going one row per day, or, if your class is small enough, getting every student to be able to play individually. It's a very easy way to do that.
Right. And if you're in a homogeneous class, you get everybody in there together. It doesn't matter, you have your schedule. Well, clarinets you're tomorrow, saxophones you're the next day. Have your rhythms ready to go. But just a couple more things about, I guess, assembly and posture, things like that. I always try to stress with the students that, this is months on down the road, and we're no longer, well, not months, but several weeks. We're no longer starting class with just the neck of the saxophone. We're on the full instrument for all of class. It was really important to me that they open that case. The first thing they do is put the neck strap around their neck. And the very next thing they do is they put the reed in their mouth to soak, because, we're not oboe players. We don't have our little container to soak our reed, but the reeds need to be soaked. A reed is going to sound raspy and dry if it doesn't have that moisture on it. So that's what they should be doing. And then we grab the saxophone by the bell carefully. And the very next thing we do is attach the neck strap to the saxophone. This is experience here. We're very clumsy in middle school. And, I would talk to the kids about taking time and care when they would set the neck into the receiver, the body of the saxophone. Be sure that they've got that octave key mechanism lining up with the brace that's underneath the neck. I think almost every brand still has that brace on the lower side of the neck, and you can line that up with that octave key mechanism, and you're good to go. And now we come to the school of thought that has created wars between music educators. Not really, but it's, do you play saxophone to the side, or do you play in the middle? And I say both, because I think we all know that it's common practice for your alto players to play in the middle. If you look at the top college university programs, by and large, there are exceptions. They're playing in the center. Tenors do not do that because you can't. It's too long of an instrument, and certainly you can't do that with a baritone saxophone. But if you look at the top collegiate programs, you're going to see those guys playing in the middle, and I think that's pretty much common practice. However, there's a lot of different opinions about this, and a lot of people say, if you look at the way the saxophone, some people say if the way the saxophone is made with the keys on the right outside, it's made to be played to the side. If you play it in the middle, you will muffle some of those notes. The thing about it for young students is, and the reason I only had a few exceptions to this, is it forces the student to sit on the edge of the seat. Because if you're not sitting on the edge of the seat, that mouthpiece is going to hit you about right here. So you have to get up on the edge of the seat, and you've got everything ready to go that way. Now, with my little biddies, we always had one or two little biddies. I would have them play to the side, because it was, they couldn't really get their right hand down to that lower stack of keys, and we would have them play to the side. Now, I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth. Played lead alto in several different years in colleges and in different bands, and you always play to the side, because you're sending your sound. You want your section to hear your sound. It's a different genre. It's a different concept. So you play to the side so the saxophone players on each side of you can hear if you're playing lead alto. And whereas to me, for a concert band setting, it's more important to have blend. You want blend within the section, because you got multiple players playing same parts. So therefore, playing in the middle is no hindrance to tone production or anything like that. It's going to actually help blending within the section. So I really support playing in the middle with your altos when possible, unless they're little bitty.
That's fantastic. Is there any other things that you notice sometimes bad habits with young saxophonists, even maybe perhaps if a young director is walking into a situation and they're not teaching their beginner class, maybe they're teaching students that are in their second or third year,
Yeah.
might encounter some different things, some habits that they might have to break. Is there anything else that you
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind to me is you need to alert your tenor players that this portion of your forearm should never touch any portion of your leg. There's some, and look, I catch myself doing this when I play for hours and hours, but we're talking about a 52-minute class usually, but you'll find your tenor players will want to lean over. They're leaning over and having that forearm resting on their thigh somehow. I don't know how they're doing it, but it destroys the posture and the breathing apparatus. So we would always jokingly say, okay, tenors, head, shoulders, knees, and toes all in a line. We'd have them check head, shoulders, knees, and toes like we're in kindergarten. They loved it. So watch out for that. I think in your second and third year players, gosh, there are so many different ways to skin a cat, as we say. There's more than one way to do a lot of this stuff. And this is just what I happen to have success with. But I find that you got to watch kids, because sometimes kids think the harder reed they play on, the better player they are. And I caught my Barry and tenor player a couple of times on a 3.5 Vandoren. I pushed Vandoren. I think it's what they need. I don't think middle schoolers are ready to control a Leger, any sort of fiber cane reed yet. That's a personal bias. I think they're great for marching band. They last, things like that. But I don't think a middle schooler is quite there yet. So I would not recommend any sort of synthetic reed for that age. But watch your guys, your girls in 7th and 8th grade. Sometimes they think the higher the number on the reed, the more advanced they are. And you start hearing these really dead, bright tones is because they're playing on a reed that's too hard. So I don't think they need to go any harder than a 3. We started our kids on Vandoren 2.5s, and then as soon as possible, usually right around after the Christmas break, we would try to get them to move to a 3. And the goal was by the spring concert, everybody's on a 3. We got everybody playing on a 3 reed, and pretty much that's what you need. I mean, you don't need anything harder than that. This is the situation we experience. Every school system is different. Every setting is different. But if we had our kids start on less expensive reeds for the beginning months or the first year of school, we never had much success getting the parent to see the importance of moving over to a higher quality reed. So like, the goal was you start out on a Juno, which is the Vandoren cheapie. Yep. And then we're going to go for about a month, and then we're going to ask you to get mommy to buy you a box of Vandoren. Well, mommy didn't want to do that because it's about $10 more. So we didn't have any success with that. So we kind of went back to, no, we're going to play on the blue box Vandorens. That's what your mom needs to get you. So, equipment, there's so many issues with equipments, with brands of saxophones these days. But I tell you what, you can still get kids playing on good reeds, and you need to strive and make that a priority. You may have to sell the reeds in your band room, do whatever it takes, because that is part of success. You've got to have the kid playing on decent reeds before you can ever hope to produce characteristic sounds. So it's just critical. And of course, as this entire series this is just a great starting point for anybody in here who's listening who just needs a little bit of refresher or just needs help as they enter the classroom or enter, one of their first few years of teaching and brushing up on their saxophone skills. Miss Bain is actually going to be presenting at the Midwest Clinic this year. Would you mind just giving us 1 minute's worth of what this presentation is? Because is this a new thing that they're doing this year? I don't know if I've seen this series before. Well, I think it's just maybe the second, third year, maybe max at the most. They've had this series, and I think it's a great idea. They're offering this to first and second year teachers, band directors, and this is how you would go about teaching my understanding is the first 2 weeks. The first 2 weeks of class where they've got instruments, what are the first lessons for teaching a student how to play? So we're just kind of starting from scratch, starting from day one. I'm really looking forward to it. They reached out to me. Paula Crider reached out, and the folks at Midwest, and it's a 30-minute session that'll run twice. Mm-hmm. And it's really it's designed for first and second year teachers. So it's quite an honor. Looking forward to that. One thing I did want to say is I wanted to talk a little bit. I left this out when we were talking embouchure. I want to talk about mouthpiece pressure. Okay. You know how oboes and bassoons crow a reed? Yeah. Well, you can actually crow a sound on a saxophone mouthpiece. And your altos, you want to have them in the vicinity of A or B flat concert when they play on just the mouthpiece. Yeah. You need to do this after the kids have spent time on the mouthpiece and neck first, because it's a little chaotic. It sounds a little crazy when you play on just the mouthpiece. It's a little bright. It's a little painful. But if you check your students individually, I would never recommend any sort of group honking on a mouthpiece, because that's not anything that's going to help them get a good concept of sound in their ear. But checking them individually for a concert A or concert B flat on just the mouthpiece for your altos is the way to go.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Miss Bain, oh my goodness, this has been so much great information. And I cannot tell you, especially on behalf of our listeners, thank you so much for sharing some of your awesome wisdom with us on all things saxophone. And once again, make sure that if you are at the Midwest Clinic that you do go check, and you're a first and second year teacher, please go check out her amazing clinic. And once again, Miss Bain, thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate that.
So good to see you, Tyler. It's great to be here. Thanks, everybody.